Okay, back again with very special episode. Blast from the
Woohoo!
past. Guest, actually, former host, now guest, Zach Borst.
Oh yeah,
Back.
I'm back. I'm back. What's up,
I see the
everybody?
future in front of me.
Yeah. Uh, yep. Here for one show and one show only. This could last for a long time. So enjoy it while the band's back together.
Yeah.
All right. So Zach, um, everybody who's listened to Pwned or has been listening to Pwned knows and loves you. Um, but for
My favorite.
give yourself some credit. Just roll with it. But for everybody that's new to the episode, and all the followers we've amassed since the time that you've been pursuing other interesting opportunities. Zach was former host of Pwned, my partner in crime for
Co-host. Yeah, co-host. I mean, you definitely still led the ship. I just got to like dabble.
yeah. All right. I think it's more than that, but you were the fabric of our production for a long time. But now you're back. What
Yep.
what have you been up to?
All right. So I left. So it's kind of funny. I explain this to people when I'm kind of talking about what I did in the past. That I left a job that I loved, and I told you all this at the time. But what happened was I got hired the day that the entire country shut down. I think literally my starting date was March 13th, 2020, and everything shut down. And I had left. I got burned out as an emergency manager at a previous position. I wanted to do something really cool and different. And I found this amazing company in Colchester that was looking for a geek, a video and audio geek, to help them kind of beef up their podcast. And so I worked for you all. And then about a year into it, I was like, this is the biggest disaster in recent human history.
Not the company in Colchester. Just for our listeners, you're not talking about the company in Colchester,
Yeah,
right?
COVID. In case any of you have lived under a rock for the last 3 years, there's a pandemic that surged through the planet, and in particular the Northeast, while I was at NuHarbor. And so I sort of felt this calling to go do this, and I got hired by another company to help with Project Warp Speed, which was trying to get the vaccine out and providing intelligence analysis and some other really cool stuff. And it was like I had to use these skills that I had because we were in the middle of a disaster, a real disaster. And then thankfully it actually happened too, because I also got called up from my military side and disappeared for 6 months to actually work in clinics and get people vaccinated. And like set up hospitals and all this other crazy stuff that we were doing across the country. And then when that sort of settled out, it was like almost 2 years later, so 22, and I was like, I need to keep doing emergency management stuff. So I found this dude, John Scardina, who owns Doberman Emergency Management, and we're like, hey, we're both doing really cool stuff, and I want to keep doing cool stuff. And so he hired me up. So that's what I've been doing. And we do all sorts of cool emergency management stuff. We're really we kind of joke that we're like a design company that does emergency management. Like we're trying to be like very cutting edge, leading innovation in emergency management. And one of those areas that we're really interested in was like cybersecurity and public safety. And so to tie this into a knot here, or a bow, because we had a project with a large school system, and we wanted to test out some security of their security, I was like, I know just the people. And I reached back out to my old stomping grounds, and I was like, get the team together. We're going to go do some cool cyber stuff. And so you all put together your team and started doing some pen testing on a large college campus to see if their security and camera system hold up. And then it got me thinking, like, wow, we should probably talk about this, because this was a campus that has a very good security footprint and planning and design. And I know that's not the case around the country. And so how do we, as emergency managers and public safety folks, do better? And so that's like the onus of all of this is like, I want to do better, and I know the people who can help us do better. That's you all. So
Well, thank you for bringing the team back together, Zach. Um,
it was so cool to be on the calls and like get to chat to people and see faces I hadn't seen in so long. It was awesome.
yeah, yeah. If you haven't talked to them recently, they have some more news for you.
Oh, right. Oh, good. Yeah. No. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. No. Yep. I'm in on that one as well. Yes.
It's interesting. We had talked about this similar topic. I think it was episode 140 in season 2, and it was generally speaking about the idea of saying, in the course of public notifications and emergency management infrastructure, kind of heading into the world that we knew as COVID, in order to reach the most amount of people, you kind of have to meet them where they are, and they are in the digital ethers, right? And
Yeah.
so the very short version of like what we talked about was emergency management, like historical techniques of mass communications, radios, notification systems originated out of an analog space,
Oh, yeah.
right?
100%.
But in order to meet people where they are, like, required some evolution of that technology backbone and that infrastructure backbone. So we have core notification infrastructure and community coordination techniques that are evolving, right?
Yeah.
They're going from old mechanisms, old, say, dated mechanisms, and just trying to integrate with the services that we have today, which is comes with its own challenges, but also some benefits as well. And I was curious, like, in your travels here between past company and National Guard and where you're at now, is that still the case? Is that what you're seeing today?
Yeah. So I would say there's a lot less innovation than I think we'd like to think. So what is often happening is we're taking digital sort of interfaces and piggybacking them onto analog systems. So versus, basically designing a system from start to finish where you kind of know where all of your touch points are. It's like taking these old legacy systems and then trying to jam them into the internet. And so when that happens, you have varying degrees of success for sure. So one main thing, like our IPOS system, this is the integrated public alert and warning system. This is what drives all of your messages that scroll along the bottom of your TV. It's how you get your text message alerts. Those are called WEAs. That's the wireless emergency alerting system. The scrolling message is called EAS, emergency alert system. These are systems that have sort of function, WEAs newer, but like it's still limited to 360 characters and in some cases 90 characters, depending on like what level of text message you have. The EAS systems, I mean, I honestly don't think in my house right now I could receive an EAS message other than a weather radio that I've got somewhere, that I usually take out during severe weather season, but like it's not where most people are able to. So we're trying to like you're saying, connect these dots, and it's really, really hard. On the other side, you've got like on the public responder and the emergency manager side, we're trying to make our systems more robust and more connected and interoperable. And again, we're taking old radio systems, for instance, and essentially plugging them, forcing them onto the internet using, in some cases, like kind of archaic connections. And then in other ways, like you can build really nice, robust, highly advanced systems. But like in a lot of cases, you just don't have the budget for that in one foul swoop. So they kind of like mix it to begin with the hope that someday down the line, they'll be able to like move everything over. And so I just see this as like this giant hodgepodge of like new technology, old technology, and anytime you're trying to like make these things work, you're just opening yourself up to these like huge vulnerabilities because the old technology in some ways was more secure, like POTS telephone, the plain old telephone lines. It's hard to sort of hack copper, right? Like you could cut it and like kind of break it, but like it's not like the same as like a VoIP system where you can spoof numbers, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. All those like swatting calls and stuff now, those are all sort of being driven by VoIP and running over however they're coming from the overseas starting points to the US. I don't know how that works, but like it's a system that is not really working very well, and it has huge impacts on our public safety because we don't always track the unintended consequences of these systems as we're adopting them, and we jam stuff in, right? Like we find especially emergency response, like you have these knee-jerk reactions after a disaster. You're like, we have to fix this, so you get a bunch of money and you quickly cobble something together because everyone is upset and they feel vulnerable and they're scared. And we want to do the best thing that we can. And so you jam some system together because you're like, this is what's going to, we've solved it. And then, a couple of years go down the line, we become complacent again. Contracts expire. There's no money to maintain it. There's no technical expertise to sort of maintain it in-house. And it just sits there and festers until something bad happens. So, yeah.
And then you realize Justin has stolen all the copper.
Yeah. My understanding is that's how NuHarbor's funded now. Is you guys have just been like, this is not lucrative. Cybersecurity is not lucrative. We're just going to steal copper.
Yeah, right.
We're changing the logo
we're just going to rate.
Change the logo to CU Harbor, right? Because that's the copper, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting about it as well, I mean, you guys are talking a lot about the intersection of some of the necessary technologies, right, in emergency management and how you have the information that's necessary. But just to give you sort of the pragmatic perspective from like today, going back a few years, don't forget there's been like dozens and dozens of attacks against 9/11 infrastructure that have succeeded, right? I was able to pick up 42 of them between 2018 and 2020. Right, and they have all sorts of different sources, which is interesting, right? Sometimes it's ransomware, something shut down. Sometimes it's distributed denial of service, there's flood in the system, so you can't make any calls. Pretty terrible. And I remember in the dark ages, back in 2001, as we were all worried about how to prevent, the next, round of those style of attacks. One of the big worries coming out of New York City was, had the team that decided to fly the planes in actually taken the time to execute what would have been a relatively straightforward denial of service against 911, that disaster would have been completely out of control. Because we don't realize how important 911 services are to people when something bad is happening. Sometimes just the capability to pick up a phone and talk to somebody avoids panic. Right, and we've seen across the country, notably, I think it was in February, there was a denial of service attack. There's been one against Suffolk County, against Erie County, right? And you've got people working 911 because they can actually pick up the phone, but they're using pencils and papers because there's no way to get to dispatch, right? And so when I think about the good work and the hard work and brave work that's done by emergency management folks everywhere and first responders, one of the biggest risks we have is we're not even going to get to them. We're not even going to know what information to look for.
Well, and just you're hitting on some things that are really important. So the 911 systems around this country, again, are in various states. Like those systems get purchased like in giant rounds of money, right? Like, so a lot of the consoles, like in the state of Vermont, like they made a transition from like essentially an analog system to a digital system to a more modern system. They only do that like a couple times over the course of like a decade, right? Like, because it's a lot of money and it's really complex. And so, those systems get swapped and then everything sort of changes. But there's this period of time where like you're running on old stuff. And when it breaks down, there's no backups, like that's one of the new things is like, there's definitely a lot more redundancy than there used to be. And that's one of the advantages of sort of moving towards the digital, version of what we're doing in response. But there's a lot of places where like, if a 911 center is basically shut off, there isn't another 911 center. You have to hope that you can somehow route it. And there is rollover, but like it can't, if you get an attack and a, ransomware shuts down one, and then there's a DDoS attack on the other, you can collapse the entire system very quickly. And it's scary. Like you said, the Suffolk County one, I actually know someone who, there's the scary side of it, which is like 911 doesn't work. But then there's like just simple government operations, like he couldn't get his marriage license. And so he was stuck waiting, trying to figure it out, and had to do everything manually. And then you got to wonder, like, okay, you're doing it on pen and paper. How, especially for Suffolk County, the size of that county and how many people live there, how much of that stuff is actually going to make it back into the records when everything's said and done? And we had a huge attack up right in NuHarbor's headquarters backyard. The University of Vermont Medical System, their main hospital was shut down for months. They were doing everything by hand. And when it happened, they literally overnight had to go, we have to relearn how to chart people and keep track of medications. You're doing math in your head now, like that maybe you haven't done in a long time. And so that's a huge risk to people. And it doesn't take one of the, oh man, I was going to use all the cool terms and I forgot a lot of what's the persistent threat people? Like, what do you call them?
APTs?
Like
APT
yes,
groups?
an APT. Dang, I was so close. So it doesn't have to be an APT group, right? It can be just some, a perfect example, the recent leak of all the classified documents. This was not done by some huge organization. It was an IT guy that worked, in the intelligence wing in Massachusetts. And he had access to these systems, and it's the human factor that just acts, and he
was publishing on Discord, right? I mean, meh.
Right. He was trying to impress his loser buddies, because it's like a white supremacist Discord, but like he was just trying to impress his dumb friends, and he released all this stuff. That's just an idiot, right? Like imagine what a smart person with real nefarious intentions can do to our critical infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, awesome, guys. This has been great. Folks listening to this, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and share and help us spread the good word of Pwned and EM Weekly. If you have questions, you can find us at pwned@NuHarborSecurity.com, and we will get you on the next episode.